In this lecture, we're going to figure out a way to feed the data that we get from the internet to the QML side of our application. And we're going to take a chance to actually build that side of QML. Let's go to Qt Creator and do that. Okay, here we are in Qt Creator. This is the project as we left it in the last lecture. The first thing I want to do is to actually build the user interface in QML here. The only thing we have now is just this button, but we also need a list view to be able to display the list of jokes. We also need another button to allow the user to remove the last item. And we need a spin box to let the user choose the number of jokes. Let's do that. We are going to use layouts, so let's import Qt Quick Layouts. Let's use 1.4. I think I have this installed. Yes, I do. And I'm going to put a column layout in here. It is going to fill the parent. And I am going to have a spacing of 0 because I don't want to have any space between items. I want to put in a list view. The ID is going to be mListView. Let's put in a model of 30. So that we have something to see before we put in some real data from the internet. I want to do an inline delegate like this. It's going to be a rectangle. I have some data prepared for the delegate data here, so I'm going to just put it in and try and explain it because it is not that difficult. The rectangle is going to have a width and a height. It's going to fill the parent in width. In height, it's going to have the height of the content in here, and the content is a text item. We have a color, a border, and a radius. Inside, we have a text component, which is going to display whatever data we have in the model. And in this case, it's going to display from 1 to 30. Okay, and we have a bunch of properties for this text item here. We have a width and height as well, the ID. We are centering it in the parent, and things like that. We have a font, a wrap mode, and it is aligned in the center. Okay, let's double check. We have a model, we have a delegate. I don't think we need anything else to be able to see this list view. But before I run the application, I want to grab this button here and put it below our list view inside the column layout. We want to make the list view fill the available width and height in the layout. And we do that by coming below here. We can actually put this on top here, but I like to put it down, so you can put it wherever you want. We're going to say layout, fill height. It's going to be true. Layout, fill width. We're going to say true. And we want to do the same for the width of the button. We can run the application now and see what we have. We have a nice list view. You see, we can scroll and see things from 0 to 29. It seems I was wrong. It is starting from 0. But the idea is the same. It is showing 30 items for you. Now we know that our list view is working. We can figure out a way to feed in the data from C++. How do we do that? For our data to be shown in Qt Quick, we need to also expose the data as a context property. But the way things are organized now, we don't have a way to set a context property when we download the data. We don't have access to this engine here when we use our app wrapper. We could give this app wrapper a reference to the engine, but that would be very bad because we would be exposing too many things in main. What I like to do is to do the QML initialization in my class here, and that is going to have a side effect, which is a good one, to have the main function here very clean. If this doesn't make sense, bear with me. We're going to go back to our app wrapper. We're going to put in a public method that is called initialize. It's going to return a bool. We're going to call it initialize, and it's going to take nothing again. We're going to implement it. And we're going to basically take everything we have in here, comment it out, because we are going to port it in our class. I am actually going to copy all this because I'm going to need to replace these one by one. I am going to go in my initialize function. I will need an application engine. I should put this in the header file. Let's include this. And I say QML application engine, M engine. This will do. We don't need to initialize this because this is on the stack. Now we should be able to uncomment this line and say M engine, root context, set context property. We want to pass the wrapper, but we don't have a reference to the wrapper here. The wrapper is actually this class that we are in, and we should pass in the this keyword in here. We are going to do the normal stuff we did in here, and we are going to return false when we don't find anything in the root objects. We want to actually wrap this in curly braces. This is what I like to do. And else return true when everything is all right. And you notice that I have forgotten to change these references to engine. This should be M engine. And you see that things are highlighted correct. Control A, Control I to align. And I am sorry if this is confusing you, but what we are doing, we are trying to do all the initialization we want to do in our class here. And this is going to give us access to the engine, and it's going to give us the ability to set context every time we want. You're going to see the benefit of this in a moment, but we need now to go to main and change to use this initialize method to initialize our stuff. We want to come back here. What we actually need to do is to say if not wrapper initialize. If we fail to initialize, we're going to return -1, and this is going to be fine. Okay, if we fail to initialize, we exit immediately, and if we don't fail, the application is going to keep on, and we are going to start the event loop here. Now we should get rid of this because we don't need it anymore. We also don't need context in here and application engine, but we should move the include for a QML context in our class in here. Let's try to put that in the CPP file and see if it works. Okay, before we run, I noticed that I didn't put a return keyword in here. So let's put it in. Return true when everything is all right. This is going to bring control back in here, and it's going to give control to the event loop right here. Let's run the application to see that everything is right, and it seems we are okay. Let's fetch to see what we get, and we get data from the internet. Now what we want to do is to do something when we finish reading the data. The first thing we should do is to append the data to our mjoke list here. So we should do that right here. Before we debug output, we should say mjokes append joke. After we loop in here, we should find a way to expose the data that we get as a model that we are going to use for our list view in QML. We are going to test to see if we actually had some data from the internet, and we're going to say if array size is different from 0, this will do. And we're going to say M engine root context set context property. We're going to say my model, and we are going to expose a Q variant from the list of jokes that we have. We are going to say Q variant from value, and we pass in M jokes. This will do. And after we do that, we should clear the buffer so that further requests are not going to be disturbed by the data that we have in the buffer here. That's pretty easy to do. All you have to do is say mData buffer clear. Now we should be able to come to QML and say the model for this list view is no longer a number like we had here. We can say my model. And you see that we recognize it here. Let's try and run. And you see that they say my model is not defined because it is only defined when we download the data in the slots to handle the download of data. But let's try to click and see what we get. And you see that we see the data. As soon as we download, my model is defined in our slot here. Okay, that's why we see the data when we click on the download button. Let's fetch again. You see that we are downloading some things from the internet. This is a good sign. We should go back to QML and put in a few other components. We want to put in a spin box and another button to remove the last item. Let's do that. The spin box is nothing fancy. Control A, Control I to align. We only are interested in the value that we are going to get from it. And we are going to pass that value in here instead of 5. So we are going to say spin box ID value to pass the value in the spin box. We also want to add another button. I am going to just copy this because I don't want to type all this. But we don't want to do what we do here. We just want to say remove last. And this is going to be M button 1. This is going to be M button 2, just to have them different a little bit. Let's run and see. Okay, we can now fetch 3 or 2 jokes, and you see we have 2 jokes. We can fetch another 3. This is working. We have 5 jokes. Now we want to go and get rid of this error here because we don't want to see it. Let's go back to the application and see what we can do. We are actually going to refactor this line of code here in its own method. Let's do refactor extract function. It's going to be called reset model. We want this to be private because we only want to call it in this class here. And you see that we have the method here, but Qt Creator seems to have messed up things. Let's Control Z to undo what we just did. And we are going to do the method ourselves. That's easier. Let's do void reset model. Let's implement the function in the CPP file. And we are going to copy this line here. Say reset model, and put that in our refactored function here. And we want to reset the model when we initialize, because that's where we define the model that we can put in our list view in the QML file. We are going to say reset model. And if we run, you see that reset model was put in the last refactor that we did, so we don't want to put it in again. Let's build to see that we have no other errors. Seems we are fine. Let's run the application. And we don't have the error that we had. And we are still able to fetch data from the internet, 5 jokes. Let's fetch another 2. And we have them here. Now we want to remove the last post. We need to come back to our CPP file for the class and focus on remove last here. This is nothing fancy. We just want to check if there are elements in the jokes list, and we are going to remove the last item and reset the model to have the new data set exposed to QML. We are going to say if mjokes is empty, and we want to check that it is not empty, so we are going to put a negation here, and mjokes remove last. We have a method on the string list here, and we want to reset the model so that we have a new data set. Now we want to make sure this method is callable from QML. Let's see, remove last. Yes, it is. So what we can do is come back to QML, go to the button that removes last and say wrapper, remove last, just like this. Let's run the application. We can fetch 5 posts so that we see everything. And when you remove last, you see that we are removing items. You can fetch 4 posts to have 5 posts in here. And you can keep fetching posts, adding to what you have in the list here, and you can scroll to see the entire thing. This is exactly what we want to do in this chapter, and you have outdone yourself by exposing your data from C++ and being able to display that in a list view like this. I hope you find this entertaining and exciting. And the bulk of this is really in this initialize method where we set context properties, exposing this class, the app wrapper class that we are using. And having this initialize method is giving us access to the engine right here in the class. And we are able to use it whenever we want to reset the model. This is very critical. For example, if we go in the remove last method and remove this call to reset model, let's see what happens. If we try to remove the last item, let's fetch 5 posts or 4 and say remove last. You see that the items are not being removed because the data in C++ is no longer in sync with the data that we have in QML. We are keeping them in sync by resetting the model like this. And what this method does really is to reset the context property by passing in the new data set from this list here. Whenever there is an update to the data we have in this imjokes string list, we want to reset the context property here so that the new model is exposed to QML. I hope this makes sense. So let's go back to the top here and make sure that reset model is being called. Let's run again. We want to fetch 4 posts, remove last, and you see that our thing is working again. This is all we had to do in this chapter really. In the next one, we're going to learn about new ways you can expose your data in QML so that you can even instantiate your items in QML. I'll see you in the next chapter.